Man City will briefly shift their focus away from the Premier League this weekend as they prepare for a trip to Wembley, where they'll face Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup semi-finals. While City are aiming to win an eighth FA Cup and their third under Pep Guardiola, Forest are bidding to win the prestigious trophy for a third time in their history and then for the first time since 1959. So long time ago for them since they've won it. Now, City boast an impressive record in the FA Cup in terms of reaching the latter stages of the competition. They've reached the semi-finals now for a record seventh successive season, which is really impressive.
Wild.
But they have had mixed success in the previous six. They've won three and lost three at Wembley. In terms of recent form, City are unbeaten in the last seven now, including that win over Villa in midweek, winning five of the last six. So, how important is it, Stephen, that City are entering this fixture, this important fixture now in high spirits? Because as we know, City have struggled a lot this term. There've been some low points, but they now seem to be building up a bit of positivity, a bit of momentum ahead of this crucial period in their season.
I think City are a different side than they were, and I don't think it's necessarily. It's a lot of factors, but I think mainly there's a belief and the pride's come back. And I think Guardiola talked a lot about wanting his players back, and a lot of that was about injuries, but it was also, in their own heads. And I think Gundogan came out, I think Bernardo as well, actually. I think a couple of senior players have talked about, I can't remember the exact quote, so I'm sort of paraphrasing the message, but talking about not really recognizing, the pride or, the hunger being there. And I think Gundogan said they weren't. He basically said they weren't trying hard enough. Like there's a drop of effort essentially, and it's to quote Fabian Delph, it's sort of the basics of football. You have to win your battles, you have to be more aggressive, and it's funny because a lot of the focus from myself and we've had a lot of these videos together, and from the general commentary around football has been the age of Manchester City's midfield, and it felt like the obvious touching point, given City's players are getting a bit older, a bit more tired, and maybe a lack of hunger. But for some out of nowhere, these players again, De Bruyne, Bernardo, Gundo, and Kovacic, they found their legs again. They're running really hard. It's one of the most aggressive teams in world football right now in Villa. They ran just as hard and they kept the ball and their pressing was good. And this is, this a lot of this is mentality. Like one of my favorite things in sport and football in general is how a player looks faster just because they're confident. It doesn't make any sense, Like players sometimes look slow and then all of a sudden they look fast again if they're winning, and that's entirely down to reaction times and confidence and conviction. Where players just they look sharper because they don't doubt themselves. And City looked slow in the winter months because they were doubting themselves, and they looked older and the running didn't look quite as it looks more laboured, and a lot of that is entirely down to a lack of belief or there's fatigue, of course, in general. But I don't think they're any less tired now. Maybe they are a little bit because the injuries have calmed, but they're obviously tired. But I think there's more conviction. They found themselves. They're playing smarter. If you can't run quicker, you have to run smarter. And I think City are doing that. Guardiola, of course, has tweaked the system a little bit. He's keeping three players back basically. He's keeping them all a bit deeper. Um, and I think I've been really impressed with how City have found themselves a little bit, and the resilience has come back to the team, and it gives me a lot of confidence, against Forest, because Forest, a few weeks back when they beat us 1-0, it just feels a slightly different side now. That they've changed the way they play a little bit. The spirit is back in the team. The older guys are running really well. We're getting the impact off the bench from from the wingers. Marmoush has been a revelation to City, I would argue, in how he's allowed us to play. McAtee's had a few good games. Nico Riley's broken through. It just feels like all the pieces are falling together right now. And look, we're not at our thrilling best and our genius best, but I think the spirit is back in the team and they're becoming hard to beat. And I would argue the fear factor is coming back step by step. And they're picking themselves up. They're building the confidence again, and they're looking like Manchester City. Like that performance last night wasn't a thrilling one. No, of course it wasn't. But I would take that every day, every year, against a team of the quality right now of Villa, at this stage of the season. I've seen City put on loads of those performances over the years. So, we think about Forest, and yeah, I do think this is a different side to the one that played Forest, a few weeks back. I think City are a lot more confident now than they were 6, 7 weeks ago. And Forest, as good as they are, I'm very confident about this game. I think like City have got more than enough belief right now, and they know who they are again. I think they found themselves, and like been a gap year or something. But they're much more at home with who they are, and I'm expecting this to be a very different game than the last time out.
Yeah, you mentioned there that defeat for City at Forest. That's the last time they've lost. They've put seven games unbeaten since then. Um, how do you see this game going? Do you think it could be a tight one? I know the reverse fixture at the Etihad City convincingly beat Forest 3-0 on home, so I think it was just a bad day at the office for Forest in that
Yeah.
one. But of course they won then 1-0 as we mentioned. Then is it going to be another tight one, or can we see goals? How do you see this one going?
I'm very confident. I'm looking at the lineup last time. There's multiple changes. I mean, Kusanov was playing in that game, Edison, obviously, but Edison for various reasons. Nico Gonzalez, Foden, Doku, Savio, and Haaland. There's like 6, 7 players there who won't be in the team probably. I suspect it'll be very similar again to what we saw because Guardiola, he wants that composure because we can't run quite as well. He's settling to. He's trying to find the identity of City again. He's trying to make him pass again and move. And I don't think for one second, as I was saying earlier, that Savio or Doku have done anything wrong. But he just wants the control. He wants. I don't. I think for a long time, a lot of City fans, and myself included, have been like, he just loves Bernardo Silva and Gundogan too much. I don't think it is that actually. I think, of course, he does, but I think he loves the idea of what they can do more. It's more the fact that they can play 1,000 passes. Where I don't think these attacking wingers and the new signings are quite there yet at doing that. Not that they can't be, but I think he wants to play a certain way, and the players best suited to it, even if they're older, are Bernardo, are Gundogan, and so on. So I think Guardiola's going to lean on that. I think it'll be a very similar setup to what we saw at Palace, what we saw against Aston Villa. And of course, the fact that no Haaland's there forces to play a little bit differently. I think you might see McAtee again. I think McAtee's movement's really good. I think Doku might be relegated, unfortunately, to the impact sub role because it works. Marmoush will probably play off the left. De Bruyne, he's working really hard right now. He's not shining it aggressively. He's having his moments and creating chances still. I think he plays the false nine again. It might be Kovacic, Gundogan, and Bernardo Silva again because it sort of works. And O'Reilly seems undroppable right now. Diaz and Vardiol seems a really good centre back pairing. I think we're going to see pretty much the same, and I suspect it'll be a different game because City seem a little bit smarter, a little bit more confident in themselves again. Wembley as well. Look, I know we've not been perfect in the FA Cup semi-finals there, but I think there's a resilience back and a focus now. And given that we've lost the Forest reasonably recently, I think there's a little bit of retribution to be had there. And I think there's a confidence right now. And the Aston Villa game could be the springboard for City to play players themselves again. And it'll be tight. Yeah, almost certainly. It's not going to be a game of many goals. But I think Forest's form is a bit up and down. They are not quite as versed in this Wembley thing as City are in the modern era. Um, I think City will have enough, and I think we'll be fine. I'm expecting City to win this game. I think experience will show here in a good way. I think the familiarity of the setting for City, the results recently. Yeah, I think it's all pointing towards a City win.
Yeah, and I'm sure as well there'll be a little bit of talk around Morgan Gibbs-White over the weekend, who of course has been linked with City recently. We've spoken about him recently, haven't we? And he's one of several players that City will need to keep an eye on, along with the likes of Hudson-Odoi and Anthony Elanga and Chris Wood in attack, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Gibbs White will probably see it as a chance. It's cliched, a bit of an audition, but he has the ability. I was reading about him quite a lot, and he's focused and he's a proper leader. Apparently, like one of those guys who's just intensely focused on his football. He won't be scared of playing at Wembley. He'll absolutely rise to the occasion. And look, they've got a team. The thing is, there's a beauty in knowing how you play. The beauty of teams like Forest is they're unashamedly them. They will sit deep, they will counter, and they'll just try and hit the wingers who play a certain way. And everyone plays to their strengths. I love teams where there's no square pegs in round holes. It's just everyone has their role. Everyone sticks to it aggressively, and they know what they do. Chris Wood just wants to score goals. The wingers just want to beat people. The midfielders want to shuttle forward. The defenders just want to defend. It's just very simple. I know that sounds a little bit trite, but it's just true. It is. It's that's who Forest are, and as much as you know, Wembley can get to teams, and I think it will a little bit. I don't know if it does if you're not a front foot team. If you, I think the pressure on teams usually is on teams who go and try and assert themselves in the game. Forest, their style, and I do think that they'll still feel it, but their style naturally allows them to be a little bit more, cautious and grow into the game at Forest at Wembley because they're not expecting to go there and dominate the ball. They are expecting to be the underdogs, and that is essentially how they played all season. Even at home, they play that way. So as much as I think they'll feel it, not as much as maybe teams who are a little bit more assertive. Like when Newcastle went to Wembley, against United in the final, you could tell people expected a lot from Newcastle, and I think they felt it. and it took them maybe that defeat to get their head around it and come back and win it next time. I think they might be similar to Forest to a little extent, but they play such a different way. I think they got very little to lose here. No one's expecting them to beat Manchester City. No one's expecting them to come out and attack Man City. They can just sit back, let the wingers do their thing, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, no one's going to blame them. So I think that'll definitely play into their hands.
Yeah, and finally on this game, if I was to get a prediction from you for for this game, you think fancy a City win then?
Yeah, I do. I
Yeah.
think it's going to be another game for the runners of Bernardo Silva in midfield. I think Kevin De Bruyne has got a big game in left. I think this is the kind of game where Nico O'Reilly and Marmoush, these guys have that that feeling, that clutch gene, for want of a better phrase. Yeah, I think they'll step up, and I can see City winning this one. Might be close for a while, but I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being reasonably comfortable, like 3-1 or something like that, or 2-0 or something like that for City. So I'm confident. I'm seeing City return, and they could wipe the smile off my face, but I don't know. You can just sense it in the air. And a game like the Villa game is huge for a team like Manchester City.